Hi, this video presents the current progress of my diorama project, including the conceptual development, technical workflow, and key design decisions that shaped the scene. Currently, I have finished modeling the house and focused mainly on the textures first. I took inspiration from a tortoise because the architecture of the Stilt house resembles the shape of a tortoise. However, I still wanted to preserve the original structure of the house, not stylize too much the shape, but mainly experiment with the textures instead. For example, I applied stylized shell patterns to the roof, while the pillars were inspired by tortoise skin. At first, I planned to apply the mosaic style, which is my art style reference, across the entire house from the pillars to the walls. However, it became visually overwhelming, so I decided to keep the roof and pillars stylized while leaving the rest of the house wooden to create balance. The main colors I used are muted and earthy because I wanted the house to feel nostalgic and calm. I chose orange and blue as complementary colors to create contrast between the roof and pillars while still keeping the atmosphere soft rather than harsh like green and red. So now I will move on to the technical process and explain how I created these textures. I had two main focus areas, the roof and the pillars. After finishing the textures for these important elements, I continued texturing the rest of the house. I used Photoshop to create all the textures. First, for the pillars, I used a referenced artwork to study the art style. Analyzing the style helped me understand how I could approach the UV texture map. Coloring the pillars blue, I noticed that the artwork used ground lines to separate different pieces, so I used sharp edge brush to recreate those lines. I also observed the use of color gradients and shading transitions, so I added lighter and darker tones to create more depth and variation. For the roof, I wanted to stylize the tortoise shell further, so I referenced patterns from The Kiss by Gustav Klimt. I painted circular and square patterns to resemble decorative shell shapes. I used square brush to create rectangle patterns and round brush to create circular patterns. I also sampled colors from Gustav Klimt's artwork to make the roof feel more vibrant and alive, such as pink, green, red, and blue. After that, I textured the remaining parts of the house using wooden textures. Not all parts used the same shade of brown. I preferred using different shades of brown to make the house feel less flat and heavy, while also creating smoother transitions and helping separate different objects, such as the doors, windows, fences, and stairs. I used custom brushes to create wood grain patterns. Once the base colors were complete, I added dust shading variation and surface imperfections to make the house feel older and more realistic. I also created specular maps for the roof and pillars so they could reflect light more effectively. I wanted the roof and pillars to appear more reflective than the other parts of the house in order to represent metallic surfaces inspired by mosaics and the kiss painting. In contrast, The wooden textures are rougher and reflect less light, so I kept the specular value lower. In some areas, I painted brighter values on the pillars and decorative roof patterns to make them even more reflective. In addition, I used bump maps on the mosaic pillars, roof, and wooden floorboards to add more surface depth. I added scratches to the roof and slight damage to the pillars to make them appear aged and weathered over time. I also made some of the decorative roof patterns and mosaic pieces uneven with brighter bump value. In the wooden areas, I embossed the wood grain to create more texture detail. Currently, I have completed the modeling and texturing of the house. Here are the block counts for the lotus flowers and surrounding environments. In the next stage, I would like to animate lotus flowers growing and gently moving in the wind. Thank you for listening.